We'd like to welcome you to the very first lecture of the AHVMA of 2019. Hopefully everyone is enjoying their stay so far. Before I do introductions, we have a couple of quick notes. First, the Texas attendee sheet is in the back of the room, so if you want credit for your CE, go ahead and sign that each lecture. There'll be a different one out each lecture. Please silence your cell phones. That includes the vibration that kind of disrupts everything. We'd like to thank our sponsors, especially Treatables, who has sponsored this course. You can find all of our sponsors either in your program or in the app. The app is a great place to look for information. There's a game on there. I'm told that the prize is amazing. I have no idea what it is, but I'm told that it's really great this year. And you can find anything you need to know on that, as well as sign in for your CE hours. Notes are available on that app as well. The exhibit hall is open from 9:30 to 5 today, so go visit our exhibitors. And on the app as well, there's a conference evaluation. We, as the conference program committee, love when you guys help us evaluate the conference and see how we can change and make things better for you for next year. There is a banquet tonight, so if you have your tickets, make sure you come to that banquet. I'll be there. It'll be fun. We would like to thank the VBMA, the Veterinary Botanical Medicine Association, for sponsoring Greg Tilford today, and there's some information on them at the back with the Texas attendee sheet as well. So without further ado, I would like to introduce to you Greg Tilford. Greg Tilford is a leading force and an early pioneer in the field of veterinary botanical medicine. His 24 years of professional experience as a formulating herbalist and educator began while living off the grid for 11 years in the rugged mountains of Montana. There he engaged in an intensive study of medicinal plants, their human and animal uses, and the interconnected relationships that exist between all living things that depend upon them. His work transcends conventional science to explore the roles of plants and animals as teachers and of keepers of planetary wellness. Greg has authored 4 books, including the acclaimed Herb for Pets, The Natural Way to Enhance Your Pet's Life, and dozens of published articles. In the recent years, he has been traveling the world, teaching and lecturing to audiences ranging from lay pet owners to veterinarians and institutions of higher education as far away as Japan, Taiwan, Thailand, and Central America. Part of his outreach effort is with bringing bioregional herbalism into awareness so common plants can be assessed and safely used in the care of animals anywhere, even in the most impoverished regions. Greg's most current work focuses on the human-animal bond and how plants, animals, and earth are interlinked. In his much anticipated keynote address, he will be sharing his insights of just how important the role of holistic veterinarian is in the grand scheme of health and healing, not just of animals, but of the entire planet. Greg is the co-founder and president of Animal Essentials, a company that has been manufacturing natural pet supplements since 1995, and we'd like to welcome him to our conference this year.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here at this little motel with you. They left the light on for us, right? How many people here have heard the term bioregional herbalism before? Bioregional herbs. It's a really good way to start the first 2 lectures of the day, because what bioregional herbalism is, it's the study and use of plants that literally grow at your feet. And it's pretty much the way the rest of the world outside of humankind operates. Nature has provided a diversity of plants by which we can find everything we need in the bioregions that we live in, whether it be on the coast of temperate North America or in the jungles of South America. There's an alternative for everything we find. For instance, echinacea. People here have heard of echinacea, right? So echinacea, you move into the deserts of the Southwest and moist, dry, hot areas, you might find yerba mansa, which has very similar polysaccharide constituents and immune boosting constituents. The point is that nature provides its diversity so everything on Earth has access to it. And the beauty of bioregional herbalism is that it gives you the opportunity to become intimately aware of what you're using and what's at your feet, what's there presenting itself to you. And we're part of this whole big, beautiful globe, this amazing living earth, you know, and we're not excluded from that. It's available to us. The problem we have, and you're going to hear this from me again today, is we're tied up and we're so busy trying to think our way through things, we can't just intuitively reach down and grab something like the animals that you treat. On the other hand, in terms of bioregional herbalism, there's also certain plants that insist on just following us around. They make sure that they're there for us all the time. Enter weeds. You know, there's been a few different definitions of weeds, and mine is, you know, weeds are simply a plant whose virtues have either been forgotten or yet discovered, but generally forgotten, because most of what we consider weeds, the things we scorn and cuss and spray and pull and go to the chiropractor over and from gardening, they came here because of us. They followed us here in our footprint. And it's amazing because a lot of these plants, when we look at the therapeutic values of them, they're actually doing a lot to heal basically our behaviors. And for instance, a lot of the wayside weeds that I'll be talking about are liver stimulants, liver tonics. In a spray zone where they're often subjected to all kinds of chemicals and glyphosates and everything else, it's like they're following us around in those margins saying, hey, you know, I'm here to repair you and to repair the earth. A lot of the weeds that we're talking about were cure-all medicines at one point. We just forgot about them. And it's funny because, you know, there's a lot of herbalists in this room, and you get the similar question. What is the greatest herb in your mind? What is the most powerful? What really turns you on? What comes to mind when you close your eyes and you think of a plant? And oftentimes, you know, people think, oh, he's been all over the world. It's got to be something I can't even pronounce, out of some jungle in, you know, Ecuador, and it was passed down through a bunch of ancient elders and through rituals and everything. No, it's not. It's a dandelion. You know, so the way of humanity is that we sensationalize things, we market things, we patent things, and things that grow out of the cracks of the sidewalk that, you know, can replicate the effectiveness of certain drugs doesn't really turn on pharma too much. They don't like to hear about that. But it also kind of forces us to look away from the things that are right beneath our feet, right beneath our nose, and quite frankly, in the spice cabinets in our kitchen. Some of the most powerful herbs we have exist in the kitchen, and we're using them to cook Thanksgiving turkey and everything else without knowing, for the most part. But today, for the first two lectures, I'm going to introduce you to some of my favorites and some that I've been working with. And the first one I want to talk about, there's really no rhyme or order to this, aside from they're all awesome, is bamboo. Let me see here, I've got a problem here. You can see it, but I can't. Apologies. So bamboo, you know, everybody's familiar with this, and it's all over the world. You know, there's several different varieties that grow all over North America. Pretty much anywhere there's soil, you'll find some variety of bamboo. It can grow in any kind of climate depending on the species, all the way from the tropics up to like growing zone 4. I mean, I've seen it growing in Montana. The stuff will grow out of your fingernail if you let it, right? But it's the world's largest grass, and for those who have ever been to Japan and visited the sacred bamboo forests there, it's quite amazing. I mean, you imagine yourself as an ant or a little insect walking through a lawn of grass, and the trunks of the bamboo, which is a grass, are 9 inches wide. And you're looking up to the top of these bamboos thinking, this must be what it's like to be inside of a lawn, right? And the nice thing about this plant is that anywhere in the world that it grows, you have this really wide range of therapeutic value that you can really turn people onto in animals, for animal use and human use. And as mentioned during my introduction, I'm spending more and more time traveling. And recently I was in Guatemala, very poor place, and beautiful little UNESCO town called Antigua. Anyone who hasn't been there, It's great. You know, there are some volcanoes to consider. But I went down there to help benefit an organization called the Street Dogs of Antigua. I mean, this is a tiny little town with maybe 3,000 people and about 500 dogs that roam the streets. And people have taken up a love and respect of them. They've realized there is a human-animal bond, and I'll talk more about that. You'll hear a lot about that from me today. But I went down there because they can't afford veterinary care. They can hardly afford anything. They're feeding their animals the leftovers from tortilla manufacturer, giving them the water. They use to rinse the stones, whatever they possibly can. So I found a special pleasure in going down there and identifying the weeds that I could recognize in Guatemala, because they follow us everywhere in the world. And with that, I was able to help them find solutions for skin problems, liver issues, chronic disease that otherwise didn't exist. Both the lay people and a community of veterinarians down there are now working with the weeds that grow out of the streets in Guatemala and from the jungles. Things that they overlooked, like papaya, the enzymes, papain, digestive enzymes that exist in papaya seeds, really help with the digestion, especially of a lot of the low-grade foods and poor quality foods that they're feeding these animals down there. So bamboo, the appearance, you know, everybody's seen it. It's a jointed grass. It grows quite hard. It's one of the, not just a great medicine, but it's also one of the biggest answers as a wood alternative. It's stronger than wood. It's resilient. If you have a bamboo floor and dogs, you'll notice that it's really hard to scratch. It's really wonderful stuff. I may need help here. Bamboo, as I said, it's one of the world's largest, it is the world's largest form of grass. There's like 27 varieties of it that grow in North America, and it's got a wide habitat and range, as mentioned. The cycle and the blooming season's really infrequent. It may only occur once in a decade, and it's got really weird little flowers that rise from the whole thing rises from rhizomes and basal clumps. The whole thing is useful depending on what you're using it for. How many people here are familiar with bamboo salts? Using bamboo salts for inflammation and things. A lot of traditional Chinese medicine uses bamboo salts for such. Its actions are astringent, antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, anti-parasitic, vulnerary, anti-tumor, cardiotonic, hypotensive, and it has a particular affinity toward working on ailments of the skin and the cardiovascular system. It's being researched for a lot of different things, ranging from skin issues to cancer. And it's really quite remarkable. Preparation, aqueous, ethanol, or glycerin extracts. My favorite uses for bamboo, well, it's been, like I said, it's been investigated as a healing agent for a long time, since the 1960s. Ranging from dermatitis to malignancy. I find it especially useful for skin issues. It's got enough astringency, it's got really good antibacterial properties. It really helps as a skin rinse. You can just use the leaves, you can use the young shoots, and just make a tea out of it, cool it, and use it as a skin rinse on itchy skin. It can be used internally too. It's used for, it's a cardiac tonic. Really depends on which variety. It's actually quite varied between varieties. Most of the ones you're going to find in our climes are pretty universal and can be used very safely on animals for skin problems. How many people here are gardeners? So you already hate this plant, right? So I find, couch grass, also known as quack grass, crabgrass, there's a lot of common names. You have to be real careful about common names. Start to learn, if you're not familiar with plants, start to get to know at least the binomial front name of the Latin name, Elatrigia. Otherwise, you're going to get in trouble. You run into things like wintergreen. Wintergreen is a common name for like 5 or 6 different species of plants that are totally unrelated. So get used to a little bit of Latin to identify plants. The habitat and range of couch grass, it's native to the Mediterranean area. It's actually farmed in Croatia and that region of the world, the Baltics. It's used as turf It's used for feed. It's used for stuffing pillows and beds and all kinds of things, couch grass, couch grass. What I find it especially useful for is its antimicrobial, astringent, demulcent, anti-inflammatory properties in the urinary tract. It has very specific, very good affinities to the urinary tract, used as a tincture, decoction, fresh or dried rhizomes. I like to use liquids, especially in dogs and cats because of their short digestive tracts. And there's a very limited time opportunity to get the active principles of medicinal plants into their system because it goes through them so quickly and they burn it up so quickly. So the freer the form, the more effective I find it to be. If they have to digest cellulose to break down, and I'll talk about this later on the introduction, then you have to use more. There's always palatability issues. We all know what it's like trying to feed something to a protesting cat, for instance. Get it in quick and freely. The thing I like best about, speaking of cats on couch grass, is that it tends to have a really strong anti-inflammatory property in the urinary tract, but there's no evidence to suggest that it has any kind of irritation risk to the kidneys, which you know is a big problem with cats. They have very delicate kidneys, and a lot of the cats with urinary issues are already kidney compromised. So I use it as one of my front runners for cystitis in cats, crystals, any kind of inflammatory disease in the bladder and the urinary tract of cats. You'll usually find couch grass in my formulations. Chemistry, it's mostly polysaccharides, very similar to inulin, meaning that here's one of the attributes of this is that inulin, for those who are familiar with it, how many people know about inulin? Right, it's pretty much indigestible, so it can pass through a lot of the stomach acid and everything else. It breaks down very slowly. It's not a true inulin, it's just similar in its structure. So it actually has a kind of an ability to cross blood barriers and end up where it needs to be in a very unique way that we don't quite understand. It does have some silicates and iron, not enough to really create any kind of irritation, as I mentioned before, especially in a liquid extract. You generally don't get the silicates out of the herb in a liquid extract, which is kind of a gritty substance. If you were to just chew the weeds, which cats do, dogs do all the time, oftentimes they do that for the purpose of stimulating an irritation and throwing it back up, as you're aware of too. And the purpose in my mind of that, there's twofold. It's cleansing, and second, it helps animals to eat things twice and get nutritional values out of things like couch grass, the chlorophylls, the vitamins, the minerals, the iron, that they can't get normally because they lack the enzymes to break down the cellulose barriers on the first round. So oftentimes they'll eat it, they'll throw it up, they'll eat it again. I know. Anyone had breakfast? It's actually, it's pretty well researched. Thymol, menthol, iron. Thymol is one of the strongest antibacterials around, and it's the chief antibacterial ingredient in thymus species, the thyme that we use for cooking. Thymol in and of itself can be very toxic, but with the entourage effect of herbs, of plants, it's not. It's very safe, stable, in very small amounts. It's also the active ingredient in Listerine mouthwash in a concentration of like 0.0095% or something like that. It's very minute, but it gives you an idea that this is not voodoo. It's not mystery. It's most of what we're talking about today is discovered. I mean, all this science is basically discovered in pursuit of a new drug. Most of it, drug research. And so they pick apart, the idea is to pick apart a plant's constituents and chemistries, hopefully find something that's active by itself and isolate it into a new drug. Again, it's especially useful for general UT, as a general UT remedy in cats and dogs that are prone to urinary gravel, not specific to type or pH. It doesn't change the pH in urine. It will not change, in my experience, any of the pH levels. Maybe, and herbs at best, in what I've seen, they can change pH ranges temporarily while they're in the system, while they're in the tract. Once they're gone, everything goes back to where it was before, pretty much. Yes?
when you go through this, if you'll tell me like how to fix it, I have to say that I'm ignorant. And like, do you grind it up? Do you let it dry first? Do you grind
Yeah.
it up, make a tea out of it? How do you fix it for me?
Yeah, so you need to dry this first. You know, like many plants, they tend to be kind of waterproof. Otherwise, they dissolve in a rainstorm. If you're using ethanol, if you're using alcohol to do an extraction, oftentimes you can get by with better results with a fresh plant because alcohol is a very strong solvent. But generally speaking, and especially with this, I recommend using the rhizome. You're going to use it chopped up fine, you're going to make a tea out of it, or you're going to make a tincture out of it. I use glycerin in almost everything I do. I use vegetable glycerin as my base of my tinctures because it's more palatable, it's sweet. Even though cats don't taste sweet the way we do and dogs do, it's a neutral experience for them, so it's much easier to feed. And the cool thing about glycerin, vegetable glycerin, is it doesn't have, even though it's as sweet as pancake syrup, it has no effect on blood sugar levels because it's not metabolized as a sugar, it's a medium chain alcohol, more like a triglyceride. So yes, thank you. I will talk about that. Okay. Okay, here's my favorite. And I know there was some buzz going on online about dandelion and some concerns about its safety and everything else. Dandelion, first of all, in appearance, the thing to remember about dandelion, this is often one of the most misidentified plants in the herbal world. And believe it or not, there's tons of it in organic grow operations now. You can buy it certified organic, no problem. But it's not the easiest plant to grow in that scenario. It tends to pick up and grow where it wants to. You know, and there's a lot of different uses, there's a lot of lore, there's a lot of really cool information about dandelion. It used to be called the earth nail because it's got these roots that go straight down, and it has the ability of actually penetrating hard pan beneath its feet and pulling minerals out of the earth into those leaves and into the top of the plant to feed what's above. It's an amazing system. But it's often misidentified, and the reason why is because there's so many of these yellow composites. In the herbalist world, we call them DYCs, damn yellow composites, because they look alike, oftentimes with alternate leaves and such, and very similar flowers. The thing to remember about dandelions is that it never has a branching characteristic. The flowers, as you see them here, come straight off the root crown on petioles that support only the flowers, and if you pull that little flower off, you'll see a clean stem with no flower or no leaves coming off of it. If it has leaves branching off of that stem, it's not a dandelion. It probably won't hurt anything, but it might not help anything either. It's, you know, we take it for granted. Actions, diuretic, cholagogue, meaning it's, you know, cholagogue is where the colon goes to church. No. The cholagogue it stimulates bile production, it's bitter, it's nutritive, it's anti-inflammatory, tonic, and laxative. It has a very strong affinity toward the liver, the gallbladder, and the gastrointestinal tract. The preparation, water infusion, a tea of the leaves and the flowers and the aerial parts of the plant. If you're doing the root, you can do a tea as well, but you'll get a much stronger medicinal product if you decoct the root, meaning you're going to take it, grind it up, cut it up into chunks. You're going to slowly simmer it for about 20 minutes and then let it cool until it's totally cool, and that will draw a lot more of the constituents out. Chicoraic acid, lots of lactones, taxerol, cholerogenic acid. It's got a lot of different chemistries in it. It has inulin, so it works really well as a prebiotic. Almost every tonic formula that I formulate for you, for the people I work for, everybody, it has dandelion in it. Because my philosophy is that almost any situation, especially in chronic disease, cancer, anything, is going to be benefited by better liver function and better removal of waste. So it's almost always in my formulas. Dandelion root, dandelion leaf. And there's, like I said, there's a lot of different aspects of it. The leaf and stem components, for instance, they tend to be really rich in chicoraic acid and a variety of other beta-sitosterol, and various other constituents. I find that the leaf and stem components are probably the most diuretic part of the plant. And this is a plant that basically followed us over probably on the Mayflower or something. Early European settlers who brought it over, you know, it wasn't a mistake. It came over as a cure-all medicine, as a food for humans and animals. And then it escaped, you know, and it became a problem because it loves living between other plants. And, you know, in Montana, where I spent obviously a long time, 23 years, there's a war on weeds against it, and people that finally find out about its attributes, you know, like llama farmers and various other places there, you'll see now that in the springtime there's acres and acres of yellow because the flowers and the leaves are 25% protein, and they add all of these great liver stimulant properties at the beginning of spring when animals need it the most. After a long winter, their parasite levels are up. Various other reasons, they just intuitively will turn to this plant, either nibble the flowers, the leaves, or anything else. The flower components are very rich in lecithin, which is remarkable. I mean, it's one of the highest things I can think of in terms of naturally occurring lecithin. The root components, I look at the root as basically what I consider the liver tonic part of the plant. If you're just looking for a general liver tonic without diuretic properties, I would just use the root. I tend to use the whole plant, but if you just want to isolate each component. Now there's discussion about, you know, the diuretic properties of dandelion, how strong is it? There's been studies that compare it to furosemide in Europe. It was done a long time ago. You've got to use a really strong concentration, and you've got to use it continuously for a day to realize diuretic results effectively, the same way you would a pharmaceutical device like furosemide. It does contain its own supply of minerals, including potassium, but in my mind, I've never seen any negative side effect other than the occasional allergy, which happens with anything, from dandelion. I think it's one of the safest herbs to pick up. It's a really good beginner's herb. And for those of you that are just getting started in this botanical thing and are worried about how am I going to learn all these plants, you don't have to learn many. Start with a dandelion, and you can use dandelion effectively in just about every therapeutic purpose you can think of. Learn it well, see how it works for you, see how you know how to manipulate that plant and use it for your benefit. And you'll be amazed that, you know, with a handful of plants, 5 or 10 plants, you can do a lot of stuff. I mean, a lot. So take your time, and this is a really good one to start with. Any questions about dandelion? I know there were some.
Ideal time to harvest, is it spring? Because it can crank all summer. So
Right, yeah. When's the best time to harvest it? It's a perennial. It, you know, it can grow as annual in really cold climates. If you're harvesting the root, I recommend harvesting in the fall after the top dies back. And the reason being is that when the top of a plant dies back, the constituents of the leaves, the energies of the plant go into the root, go dormant, and they're much more concentrated in the root in the fall. In the spring, harvest the leaves just before the blossoms occur, before it blooms, or when the blooms are just starting. It blooms right away, but you basically can harvest this plant anytime, but for best quality, you'd want to harvest it in spring or early summer. And as the rule generally goes for aerial parts of plants, you want to harvest it on a hot day and dry conditions when the plant is wilting almost, because it's going to put all of its defense into survival at that point. It's going to put all of the constituents that are designed by nature to keep that plant alive. It's going to pull its own constituents out of the root and put it into the top of the plant in order to survive that stress. So certified organic growers of medicinal herbs, they know this, and oftentimes you'll go to these really amazing herb farms thinking you're going to see this big beautiful garden, and you see these little, you know, depleted plants, because that's what they want. They want them strong, they want them resilient. Big thing to consider about all of the plants I'm talking about, dandelion's no exception, is they grow in the spray zone. You have to be really aware of what is in the soil where these plants grow, because they're there for that purpose. You'll see dandelions and various other weeds coming up in areas where very little else grows because we've destroyed that environment. We've either depleted the soil, we've disturbed the soil, or we've killed everything with, the herbicidal maniacs came in and started killing everything. And so these come back as regenerators, which I'll talk about in the next block of wayside weeds. They have that purpose. So my rule of thumb for harvesting weedy plants is you need to know what the history of the soil was dating back at least 3 years. I think that's, in today's world, that's the best we can do, considering that we can still find residuals of DDT in the environment that was banned back in the 1970s, and it's still around. So we can only do the best we can do, but be conscious of the fact that these things might be growing in environments with chemicals added. And if there's any side effects to be seen of this plant, it's probably something that pre-existed on the plant in terms of chemicals and herbicides and pesticides and such. Again, the specific uses. The first herb to consider when optimized digestion and waste elimination is necessary as part of an herbal therapy, which is basically all the time. I mean, the body can only do so much. It can do amazing things for itself, but when it's encumbered by its own waste because the waste is in the system for too long, can't be eliminated through the liver and via the kidneys, hopefully without all those chemicals being intact. The liver should filter them out. You really need that, to make the whole system work. The only thing we're doing with herbal medicine, folks, I'll talk about this over and over again today, is we're stimulating the body in what it's naturally designed to do. That's it. We're helping it work more efficiently for itself. And the liver is probably the most overworked organ in the body. I think everybody here will agree with that. Whether we are conscious of what's going into the body or what we're walking on or not, we're breathing toxins, we're walking on toxins. The animals we're treating are licking it off their paws and they have their face in it all the time. So liver herbs are very, very important. It's very nutritive. Contains up to 2,000 IUs of vitamin A, 20% protein, vitamin C, K, D, B complex, and dozens of trace minerals, all in a food-like form that the body can freely utilize and eliminate excess that it doesn't need. Just like a food. It's good food. In fact, it is a food. How many people here have eaten dandelion leaf or bought it? Yeah, I buy it all the time. And for those epicurious people out there, yes?
Since you're talking about it as a food, sorry to interrupt.
No.
Do animals get nutrient values, dogs and cats get nutrient values out of it if you pulverize it in a blender and just add it as a food rather than doing a decoction or a tincture?
Yes, I think you're going to get the full spectrum of the chemistry of the plant when you use it in its raw form like you just described, right? It's not going to be as easy to digest and assimilate because they have to break down those cellulose barriers and everything else. So unless you've got a good probiotic digestive enzyme going in with it, it's going to be harder to break down, but it is a very good food. And there's studies now that show that just a pinch of something green in the food dish of dogs, for instance, can lower blood sugar levels and moderate blood sugar levels just in a very profound way. Because they need it. They just don't need as much as we do. They just need a nibble. And I've been, when I spent my 10 years on the mountainside in Montana observing animals, I noticed that a lot of the animals in nature will select plants they normally don't forage on. Even spotted knapweed and things that are high in paralyzing alkaloids and stuff like that. They'll go by, they'll nibble 1 or 2 flowers off, and then walk over and start pigging out on what they normally forage upon. And that's because they have the ability to intuitively seek out what their bodies need, zoopharmacognosy, right? There's studies out, and there's a whole new science you should be aware of if you're not, called zoopharmacognosy, by which we've discovered that animals actually can intuitively not only select the medicines they need for specific issues that they're suffering, they know how to dose, how much to take, and when to stop. Especially the apes, go figure, But it's really quite amazing to watch in nature the way they select these plants that they normally don't eat.
What's the nutritive value of the dandelion sprout?
Dandelion sprout, it's probably very similar, but I've never seen a profile on just the sprouts. I would guess that it's very good and less bitter. So speaking of which, getting back to the epicurious, If you want to really enjoy dandelions from your yard or from your garden, I'm assuming that nobody sprays their lawns here, is when they start to sprout up when they're young, before they bloom, take a piece of paper, cover them up, and just weight it down with rocks, and it will blanch the leaves white. It'll deprive the plant of chlorophyll. It won't be able to produce chlorophyll, and it will be like white asparagus, same thing. You'll end up with these white leaves that are very mild in flavor. They're delicious stir-fried. They're great in salads. They don't have the bitterness and the milky latex sap that you find in the stem and in dandelions. That sap, by the way, is very good for warts, skin lesions. There's science out now. If this thing will work for me today. There's science out that shows that dandelions, well, have a very amazing, I never even realized just how anti-tumor they are. Drug-resistant tumors and cancers. Dandelions. So it can be used topically for various skin problems, skin cancer. It's been researched for mammary cancers. You know, when it came over from Europe, it was a cure-all, as I mentioned, and they used it for everything from food to cancer, and we're starting to see why. The more we look at this plant, the more we realize that it has this really broad value, medicinal value. The reason we don't see more science on it, we're starting to, is because pharma can't patent something that grows out of a crack in the sidewalk. They don't even want to hear about it, really, because it's free to everybody. It's in common domain. It's in public domain. So the science is slow at coming because it's so darned expensive. You know, I think we're up to over $100 million to approve a new drug in the United States now. That's basically what it costs. So the scientific validation of plants has always been kind of dependent upon the pharma industry and what they leave behind. It's changing some because of us, because more people are turning to these devices and these plants and these alternatives to drugs. We're demanding more science and more research, and we're learning more about the individual constituents that are in these plants too.
Did you do any heavy metal detox?
Yeah, I've heard that it can be useful for heavy metal detox. I think there's one plant that I would take above it, and that's yellow dock, which we'll talk about later. Yes?
When do you use dandelion and when do you use milk thistle?
When do you use dandelion and when do you use milk thistle? I'll be talking about thistles later too.
What is the difference?
The difference between them? This is a good question because I almost never use milk thistle in absence of another liver stimulant. And the reason being is, in my experience, is the way I see milk thistle, the active constituents of milk thistle are a group of compounds that are collectively known as silymarin. And silymarin's been shown to be hepatoprotective, and it speeds the regeneration of healthy liver cells. It doesn't stimulate the function of the liver otherwise than that, like dandelion does. Dandelion stimulates overall function, the production of enzymes, the production of bile through the bile ducts. And it stimulates the liver into working harder, while the milk thistle tends to protect the liver and regenerate the liver. So those are the differences. That's why I use them in conjunction with one another, because it makes a more well-rounded liver tonic.
What's the relationship between dandelion and arugula?
The relationship between dandelion and arugula? Arugula is in the mustard family, and dandelion is a sunflower. So they're both green, delicious leaves, but they're
Well, they're harvested a lot by Italian people.
yeah. Yeah, they're hard.
When they can't get arugula, they go to dandelion.
Yes, and I actually had this discussion in Italy once. And I kept getting arugula salads with dandelion leaves in it. And I said, there's dandelion in my salad. They said, yeah, we know.
Same.
It looks very similar. And they said, yeah, we know. It basically infests our fields. And we take as much out as we can, but everybody says it tastes great, so we just leave a little bit in, and it grows together. And arugula grows really, really fast, so trying to keep it separated, especially in Europe, where the standard is more toward organic than it is. It's almost reversed. I don't know if you're aware of that. They have this biologique farming method that is basically the standard by which, in, say, I believe it's France, if you were going to adopt any farming standard that isn't organic, you have to disclose that. Otherwise, you just can assume. So you end up getting weeds and stuff like arugula because it grows so fast and they grow together and they keep coming up in the same field. And they really work well together in a salad.
That's why they call it rocket.
Rocket, yeah, exactly, rocket lettuce. Here's one that you might not have heard about. The late Michael Moore taught me about this plant. He taught me about a lot of plants, actually. Are you familiar with Michael Moore? Medicinal weeds of the West, medicinal weeds of the Pacific West and the Canyon West. Really good reads for people that want a field book and an introduction to plants. Look up Michael Moore's books. He's not with us anymore. He was amazing. The man was just a walking tome of information, and he spoke with the plants. I mean, he loved the plants, and the plants loved him. That's why I loved him so much. Oxeye daisy is a wild relative of the pyrethrum daisy. The plant's basal leaves have these proportionately long, they have little petioles that look like spoons. I don't have a picture of that, unfortunately, today. But the leaves are delicious. They're real sweet tasting. If you know how to identify it, it's great. It blooms in the early summer. You're going to find it it's a Eurasian import. It came from Europe. But you'll find it throughout the northern third of the United States mostly. You'll find it everywhere, but in the northern third, it's really predominant. And you'll often see it when you're driving forest roads or walking a trail, and you'll see these beautiful white daisies with a characteristic dimple right in the middle of the flower, growing in patches, really dark green leaves, and makes it really easy to identify. I'm going to have to get this thing figured out. I'm going to back up here. It's diuretic. It's astringent. It can be used as a first aid remedy in the field. You can just crush up the leaves, the flowers, whatever, apply it directly to bites, to sunburns, anywhere where a reduction of tissue will relieve itching. It has antibacterial properties, but I think the most notable thing about this plant is its content of naturally occurring pyrethrins. You can actually take this plant, grind it up. It looks great in the garden. You can recommend it to your clients. You can grind it up, make a flea powder out of the dried plants. And the thing to remember about pyrethrins, especially the natural ones, is they tend to be paralytic to insects. They don't kill them all the time. So if you're doing a flea rinse or something with this plant, by which you would make a cooled tea and pour it over a dog or a cat or whatever, do it outside where the fleas can fall off and rinse off somewhere away from the house, because a lot of them might wake up and they're probably going to be hungry when they do. So, but it can be very effective. It's one of the most effective insecticidal agents that I've used. You can use it in gardening applications too, wherever pyrethrum is indicated. Sucking insects, little caterpillars that are eating your bougainvillea, which I had a problem with before I came here. It can be used very effectively, and basically it's bioregional herbalism for herbs at that point, right? Using what's at your feet to treat what's at your feet. It's part of the system. You'll hear a lot about the system during the keynote today. I think it's because it won't talk to this. Now it's shutting it off. This is another one of my favorite plants, plantain. It's not a banana. Again, see, that's that common name thing. Plantago species, this is Plantago major. It's probably the more common of the two that are most prevalent here in the United States. And this stuff was known for a long time by Native Americans on the east side of the United States in this region as white man's footprint, because it was brought over by early settlers again as a food, as cordage, various other reasons, and it tends to follow us in really compacted soil right in the middle of trails. You'll find it right in the middle of parking lots. You'll find it right underneath your car tires. It loves it. It just loves really compacted, depleted soil. It's got a nail of a root that goes straight down. It pulls nutrients out of the ground. This plant is very nutritious, really high in vitamins, iron. It tastes delicious. It tastes like spinach, except for, see these leaf veins? These are basically fibrous cords that run all the way down from the leaf to the base of the plant. And if you pull these leaves off, they'll stick out of the end of the torn stem, and you can actually grab them and peel them away. And they're strong enough to tie together and use for fishing line or even suture. Really remarkable. And the bigger the plant, the stronger it is. It's been used for cordage, for basket making. It's been used for all kinds of stuff in that reason, in that capacity. It also has all parts are useful. The affinities are digestive, urinary tract, and skin. Let me get to the good stuff here. Demulcent and astringent. This is my go-to plant for bites when I'm on the trail. Insect bites. Any kind of insect bites. You can take the leaf, smash it up into it's got lots of moisture in it. You can just smash it up in your hand, tear it up, and just rub the juice right onto irritated areas. It works wonders. It turns non-believers into believers of herbal medicine really fast. Internally, not only does it have this astringency that helps reduce inflammation, but it also has just enough mucilage, which is a polysaccharide substance that is very oily, slimy, sticky, but water soluble. Makes it a good bioregional, earth-friendly alternative to slippery elm. It's not quite as good as slippery elm in terms of soothing the digestive tract and the colon and such. But it comes close, and it's all over the place. Slippery elm has been compromised in the wild for many years by overharvest and Dutch elm disease, so we're really careful to make sure that it's ethically wild harvested or certified organically grown. Yep, I want to back up, I'm sorry. So this is another variety of plantain here. This would be English plantain, Plantago lanceolata. See the leaves, they're very thin, they're more lance-shaped. But if you look to identify the plant, you'll see the same characteristic of the leaf veins, the same characteristic of the flower that grow like little cobs on top of a blank stem. And one of the most common familiar uses of plantain and Plantago is psyllium, Plantago psyllium. This is Plantago psyllium. This isn't the same species, but basically we're using the seeds, and any one of them can be used the same way as a digestive tonic, as a lubricating fiber laxative. It works very well, and it's everywhere. It's easy to grow. It comes back. The only problem with growing it generally, if you want really good Plantago major, is you've got to really deprive it of soil. You can't pamper it too much, or you just end up with these big leaves that they don't have as much characteristic to them. So it's a very easy plant to find. It's a very easy plant to use. And again, it's my number one go-to for bug bites and also stinging nettles. How many people here have ever harvested stinging nettles? Yeah, Urtica dioica. If you don't introduce yourself to that plant, someday it will introduce itself to you. I guarantee it. Any questions? I think we're just about out of time for this segment. Great. Stick around. I'm going to do this for another hour. Thank you.
Finding your visibility in today's climate with website creation, hosting, SEO and social media management, telephone greetings and VoIP services, and online video production.